No, I'm the person who started the Prader Willi services here. I developed specialists. Unfortunately, a lot of those folks have died. What was weird for me, the ones I did see, and I couldn't see them all, you know, they gave me a picture of them when I left. They were in their 20s. So that's how I see them. And then when I would see someone now, I'm like, what happened to you? You know, but it is clear to me at some point you're going to need to address aging in PWS because you're getting some older folks, all right? Let's see your oldest person. Do you know? With Prader Willi? 60s? Okay. You know, as they get more frail. When I left free, I moved to Massachusetts. Well, I went to another ACLD, and then I moved to Massachusetts, and was a professor at a university there, special ed. But I kept doing this. I kept doing this because it's my passion. I kept doing this because very few of us do this. And Prader Willi, it's considered a low incidence disorder. Doesn't get a lot of attention unless, you know, I will get calls to go to a school because there's somebody who's having a crisis, and I'll get calls to go to a group home because somebody's having a crisis. But here, I'm not here just, I've been working since Sunday. I visited the 5 Prader Willi programs. This is my last show. You need huge changes in your Prader Willi services, because right now you don't have Prader Willi services. You have group homes with mixed population, and you've got this Prader Willi group and a more typical for one of another. And that's not, it's really hard to run a house that way. I know that for sure. And just for history, when I first met with parents who asked us to start a group home for their kids, I thought I knew everything. And I thought, oh, why would you want to segregate your kids like that? Why would you want them in just all clumped together? Like, here's the Down syndrome house, here's the Prader Willi house, here's the this house. That didn't feel good to me. Until I went to visit the few programs that existed at that time, it was like late 80s, and I talked to the people who lived there. They told me, well, you better lock this up, you better watch the trash, you better, they steal. And so I realized, and then the staff would tell me the whole behavior piece. So I was converted. Yeah, they'll be better off in a segregated setting, not that they can't go to day program or do dances and all that, but to help them feel not different finally. And I think that's true of any minority population. It's nice if you're not the only, the only one or two, and you can get support from each other, that kind of thing. But anyway, we'll be working on that here. Everyone with Prader Willi syndrome, with the exception of 1 or 2, are now obese when they weren't at one time. That's all I need to see to know. Oops, what's going on here? Because if you're going to claim to serve people with Prader Willi syndrome, you got to do it. You got to take care of health and safety before all else, right? So that's why I've done more than training. Not good. I've met with your administration, I've met with your clinicians, all in these separate groups. I met with the managers, my favorite, and because those are the people who are in the trenches, and the DSPs, but they're not here, unfortunately. I think they're going to get this instead. So, we've talked about a lot of things. We've talked about day program and how to make that a better. I know day program's an issue. That became very clear. And the folks I spoke to from day programs are open to trying to think about better ways for them to be in their programs without so easily obtaining food. do have to do a shout out to Michelle Amato for getting me here and arranging 5 days of work. Thank you, Michelle. It wasn't easy, and I'm not easy. And I want to thank you for being here. I know it was mandated, so I'll make it worth your while, and hopefully you'll learn a lot. There's a whole lot to talk about. What you have in your hand at the PowerPoint is what you must know, but there's a whole bunch more. I can do 1 and 2 day trainings on Prader.
Did you get to meet some of the staff when you went to the house?
Yes, but I didn't get time with them, and I thought I might, but I missed my ferry by 2 minutes. I confess. That backed me up, and by the time I got to Hempstead, which was the last house, they were going to bed.
Okay.
Not the staff, the residents, so I missed some folks.
I'm from Hempstead.
As we do this, I want you to interrupt me with questions. This is for you. I know this stuff. So ask some questions. If you're too shy to ask questions in front of everybody, write them down, email me. My email's on the back under resources, okay? So that's a little bit about me. That's enough about me. I just want to know, how many are here from residential, you know, in the trenches kind of? Okay. How many are here, upper management? And you are. What are you?
Quality improvement.
Well, oh, good. I didn't mean to sound rude, but what are you? A person. And how many of you are clinicians? Wow. And day program? No day program? I know some came yesterday. I look at you because you spoke about it.
I started here in day program.
Yeah, and you have a lot of knowledge from your experience, which is good. But the first thing I want to say is, right off the bat, when I started out in the 80s, and the reason these parents came for free to beg us to open a program just for Prader Willi was because they were dying. Right and left, in young adulthood, 20s. They were just dying because they weren't diagnosed, some of them, or they were diagnosed very late. Some of them had significant enough behaviors that they could manipulate their parents adequately and their kids, these mothers, their kids were obese, and they just didn't know what to do. Nobody knew about Prader. Dennis, who was in the Hempstead house, was at the Lindenhurst ICF, which I guess doesn't exist anymore. Here's what I knew, and I was in charge of that group. Here's what I knew. He was short and fat, and he needed to be in a diet, so he sat at the diet table. He had lots of behaviors, but we didn't know anything, honest to God. So, I knew people were dying. They were being put in psychiatric facilities because they have all these weird behaviors. Then they become obese. Psychiatric facilities are the worst place for Prader Willi syndrome. They always get fat there. And then home. That's a whole. So keep them out of those places if you can. Keep them out of hospitals, period. So that made it a passion for me. I'd never worked with a population that died from their disability. They died. So that was a real hook. And it's continued to be all these 30 plus years. Go to every conference there is, because there's always something new. So much has changed since we started out, which I hope will keep filtering through to all of you. I can't do everything, but I'm going to do my best. So the first half of this presentation is like an overview of Prader Willi syndrome, and the second half will be more specific strategies. Do I have a clicker or just this?
Yes, it's just the.
Okay.
Yeah.
So first of all, what is it? It's really complex, and it has to do with the 15th chromosome. It's a chromosomal aberration. It was described in 1956, which for me isn't that long ago. Doctors Prader, and Willi, and it's Prader, not Prader. So if you say Prader, it sounds very sophisticated. I don't know what happened to Labhart. They must have gotten mad at him and said, your name isn't going to be on the or that's too many names, I don't know. 1 in 12 to 15,000 live births, male, female, all races, all cultures. I go all over the world, and there they are. Interestingly, most places, let's say, most countries their folks don't reach the level of obesity ours do, just like our general population, like Taiwan, they consider obese. I'm like, oh, I wish our guys looked like that. Because of their diet in general. We have a very bad diet, and we have a weight crisis in this country. It doesn't run in families. There is one kind of Prader-Willi that does, but it's so rare. It's not even worth talking about. And it lasts forever. You can't fix it. There's no fixing it. We can deal with symptoms. Now, this is called the deletion. These are genotypes, meaning the different ways you can get or have Prader-Willi. So I'll give you my little genetics lesson, and I'm not a geneticist. The deletion, mom contributes on the 15th, dad contributes on the 15th, but there's a little piece of missing material. That's Prader-Willi in 65% of the cases. This is approximate. Disomy is also referred to as UPD, uniparental disomy, one parent contributing to. And that's, mom contributes, dad doesn't contribute at all. So, of course, mom has to contribute again. That's uniparental disomy. And that's about 30% of the folks. The imprinting defect is also very rare, unless you find out in your records that you have somebody like that. I'm not going to focus on that. But I am going to talk about some differences here. And if you don't know their genotype, I urge you to find out. Go through the records. It might be there, maybe not with the older folks, but there is genetic testing that is not complicated, and do it because there are some differences you should be aware of. I meant to mention phones. If you could turn them off and put them out of sight, because I know how it is. If you're on call, then put them on vibrate. And as someone just did, if you need to step out, I understand. I was in your shoes. All right, what's a syndrome? It's a bunch of characteristics. When they put together, you have this person. A good example is Down syndrome. They have a certain physical features. They have medical features. You know, they have a look. They have a behavioral phenotype, stubborn, they're loving, right? You can call them stereotypes if you want, but really they're attached to the syndrome. Who's phone? I don't mean to say who's phone, I mean turn off the phone. So Prader-Willi is the same thing, and that's what you're going to see here. As you know, the characteristics can vary. Some of your folks act out quite a bit. Some of your folks don't, they just complain. Some of your folks are major food seekers, some aren't. So that,
I am sorry, I'm trying to turn it off. I apologize.
I have the same problem. So if you just, I don't know how to use the phone. So sometimes I just do put it down to no.
Silent.
Yeah. The prenatal stage, there's very little movement. And if it's a first-time mom, she may not really be aware that something is amiss. But because they have hypotonia, which is weak muscle tone, they don't move properly for a normal vaginal birth, so they often have to have a C-section.
question.
Sure.
With the new genetic testing they do before you're, I believe, 11 weeks pregnant, the blood testing, and they test for all the genotypes, Down syndromes, and abnormal characteristics of gene carriers. Are you seeing less babies born with this?
You would specifically have to ask to test for Prader because it's rare. And if you had no, most of us would have a reason to ask.
Right, unless there's a familial history.
Well, they don't, it's not inherited. It's a fluke. It's a fluke. It's not necessarily related to mother's age. We're trying to get some of these correlations, but they're pretty weak. But they are being diagnosed at birth based on the clinical characteristics. So I'll show you those. See that baby? Now, for you nursing folks, you would call that a floppy baby. Because most babies, if you pick them up, they have sort of a startle, right? Because their muscles are okay. They're hypertonic. And they have feeding problems. They usually need to be tube fed for a period of time. Because they have a poor suck. So there's failure to cry, and they have a weak cry, which is really sort of sad because newborns and infants, when they cry, they're talking to us, and then we get to learn their language. So this is tough for moms. Even at birth, underdeveloped genitals, undescended testicles in males, this is across the board, and a delayed motor, so the rolling over, the sitting up, all that is at least 6 months behind schedule. Now, when they get into childhood, well, it's even really before, the appetite thing, hyperphagia, which is this drive for food, kicks in anywhere between 2 and 8. And a parent might notice it because their kid is crawling to the cupboard and taking something out, like a bag of sugar, if it's down too low, or anything that you would go, oh my God. And so then mom is like, geez. The other thing mom notices is she's feeding her kid a proper diet, but they're still gaining weight. So they become obese. They all have some kind of speech thing. I think you probably recognize that. And they have cognitive impairment. Even the ones with a quote unquote normal IQ have learning disabilities, and they still have that rigid thinking. The behavior problems kick in. The little ones are stealing lunches from the other ones, and they're starting to have tantrums. And I don't want to do that. Skin picking. And we'll talk about that. And they don't go through a typical puberty. So the boys don't grow facial hair, their voices don't change. The girls rarely have their period. If they do, it's sporadic. So all those typical teen changes don't happen. Now, you can picture your people, narrow forehead, almond-shaped eyes. They have a triangular shaped mouth, there's a thin upper lip. Small hands and feet, short, without growth hormone. The girls' average height is 4'11", and the guys is 5'1", regardless of the family. A high percentage have scoliosis. And again, underdeveloped sex hormones. Now they're getting growth hormone at birth. And pretty much at birth. And some of the benefits, and you'll see this as younger people come in, there's some evidence of a higher IQ. Not, mostly in the area of language. And horse taller, increased muscle mass, that's growth hormone does that. Decreased body fat, that's good news. And increased fat utilization. Now, the downside of growth hormone for providers, I mean, parents jump on this because that's all good stuff. And they seem to, they sort of normalize their appearance, right? No more short, fat people. That I could pick out so easily, and now I can't. The downside is if you have somebody who does have significant behavior problems and they're 6 feet tall and strong, that's tough. So providers didn't jump on this bandwagon, but of course parents would, as they should. And even into adulthood, by the way. They stop growing, but even in adulthood it maintains the muscle mass and they can utilize more calories. Now, this is New Zealand. If you can go. It's one of the most beautiful places in the world. You see these three? They look a lot alike. They're blonde. You can't tell, but they have blue eyes. But look at that thin upper lip, almond-shaped eyes. Classic. Then there's this one with the dark hair. She's probably UPD. They tend to have coloration more like their family. These guys are always blonde, blue-eyed, fair skin. You gotta be real careful in the sun. Lather them up with sunscreen, make sure they have a hat, sunglasses. Do you have any people who look like that? Yeah. When I first started going to events with Prader Willi syndrome, I'd walk into a room like maybe they're having a dance and I'd be like, well, how did I get here? It wasn't that. I mean, they look so much alike when they're all together. It's unbelievable. Now there's medical characteristics, and these are the things, some of which you can fix by weight loss. Oh, that's not the one. It's another slide. I mentioned medical character, scoliosis, osteoporosis. They have their bone age is far and away ahead of what it should be, which is osteoporosis, and which means they're more susceptible to fracture. So it's very important that you pay attention to any injuries that happen, any exercise programs, because if they fall, they could be easily harming themselves. Dental caries, they have bad teeth basically, but that is not their fault. Their saliva is very different. It's a thick, sticky saliva. Sometimes you'll see it a little white in the corners of their mouth. That's not their fault. And that saliva doesn't help them pass things through their throat. It's not a good saliva. But you do have to make sure you're right on dental care. They need it. Strabismus, one eye's going this way or they're going back and forth, that's common. Bruising, they bruise easily. Where you and I, if they bumped into this, they might have I'm not gonna, I have bruises all the time, but they'll have a bruise. And if you, let's say somebody's running into the road and you grab them, you're gonna leave a handprint. And then when mom comes to pick her up, what the hell happened to my kid? So if you ever do anything physical like that, write it down right away and let the mom know. So that's just a CYA thing. Altered temperature regulation. Their basal temp tends to be lower than typical people, so let's say it might be 9, and you need to figure that out. You have to do some temperature things. 96.8 instead of 9, this is an example, because I'm typically 96.8. But it's lower, so when they have a fever, it could be 99. And for us, we're still going to work, right? And then it can change rapidly. 2 o'clock, 99, 3 o'clock, we're back down to 96, then you can go back up again. It also affects what they wear. They tend, because of the low, they tend to want to wear more clothes. They tend to be cold. Do you have that?
Danny's always struck the opposite.
Well, because he's hot or because he wants to strip? That's two different things.
Right.
Stripping serves another purpose. They don't vomit. That's a horrible thing. I mean, talk about adding insult to injury, right? So if they ingest poison, it ain't coming up. There's other treatments that have to happen. They have a high pain threshold. So they can endure. Well, you've seen some of the guys rip a fingernail, rip out their hair. They're not screaming in pain. They have a very high pain threshold, which also means they can't tell you what's going on with them if they do have an injury.
In a situation where we would vomit because we're detecting something spoiled or like an indigestion or whatever, what would happen to them? And how do we know
if they did vomit?
No, if they have an indigestion. Like
oh, most of them have some kind of acid reflux of them, right?
What I'm trying to say is, like, if in a situation where someone would typically vomit and they're not, how do we know that they're going through something like that?
They just aren't going to vomit. So, but we'll talk.
Okay.
We'll talk. Another slide might help. We've done swallow studies. Some food, it doesn't go all the way down. That's why we try and do bite during, just to try and keep things soft and moving. So there's often food left. If you have anybody who regurgitates, that's what they're bringing up. I know it's a horrible thing, isn't it? It's really hard to get rid of regurgitation in any population. Again, now, I don't think I said this yesterday, guys. Very low, because they don't go through a complete puberty. The girls don't have estrogen to speak of. The boys don't have testosterone to speak of. So it's very unlikely they'll have kids. However, there are 4 to 5, people argue about this, documented cases of women with Prader-Willi syndrome having children. And it's both UPD and deletion. Now what's interesting is, like 2 of the kids were born typical. The other 2 were born with Angelman syndrome. Which, do you know what that is? Sometimes they call it the happy papa syndrome. Don't ever do that. You know, and they have sort of a smile, which looks more like a grimace, lower IQ, nothing like Prader-Willi syndrome. Angelman's, it's the 15th chromosome. Dad contributes, mom contributes, but there's a piece of missing material. Dad contributes, mom doesn't, dad contributes again. The flip side of Prader-Willi syndrome, which is why they give birth to kids with Angelman's. I think the moral of the story in terms of those folks giving birth is that they're interested in sex, some of them have sex, and we need to deal with it. I am trying to write a training book. I hate to say training because it sounds so formal, but a book about sexuality for them. The hypopigmentation is that very fair skin with the deletion folks. And some of them can get really bad infections from skin picking and need hospital care. One guy I know was a bad rectal picker. He was in and out of the hospital for prolapsed rectum. Now, this may help you a little bit. If you see abdominal distension, which is hard if they're obese, but it can still be, and they have a fever based on their basal temp, and they vomit, and they're complaining of stomach pain, high pain threshold, they don't vomit, call an ambulance. What's happening with this collection of characteristics is their stomach is going to burst if you don't get them to the hospital in time. And gas dilation is making things bigger. So, and people do die from, the stomach tissue gets compromised Weight goes up, weight goes down, that's not a good thing. Stomach tissue is compromised. So they're vulnerable for that. Particularly the ones who are closer to their ideal body weight when they go home for a holiday, let's say. We get calls about death around the holidays more than other times because when they go home, they binge. And binging, which is why they can't have unlimited access to food or money. We don't really know what their stomach looks like. And I hope when they go home none of them binge, because that's a really, I mean, young kids. Now here are the characteristics that you can change. Diabetes, hypertension. The leading cause of death is cardiopulmonary on the obese people. Stress on their system. A high percentage have sleep apnea. You have folks with sleep apnea? You do, whether you know it or not. Have you had folks who've had a sleep study? And you're the only one not.
Yeah, of course.
Many of them. And that determines whether or not they have sleep apnea, and which often correlates to obesity. Not necessarily, they could still have it after they lose weight, but losing weight has a positive effect on all these things. Now, they don't like CPAPs, they throw them away. But if you haven't had a sleep study, but you know there's some sleep disturbance going on, they're waking up, they're getting up, they're snoring like crazy, you might want to do that. It's hard to do a sleep study with Prader-Willi syndrome because you have to be asleep for a long time. But it's worth it. Think about yourself. You haven't had a good night's sleep in 10 years. You are very likely not to be too nice, and that can contribute to behavior issues. You also all know, probably, a day program probably really knows, that they tend to nod out in the afternoon, right? That's not fake, unless it's Caroline's, then it's fake. They're really tired. They went through that morning, they put out, remember, the demands, hypotonia, all that stuff. They worked really hard to get through the morning and actually, I like a nap in the afternoon myself, but they're tired. They're beautiful babies. Absolutely beautiful. I love when I go to conferences and the parents bring the babies. Now, this is an old slide. She obviously weighs around 60 pounds. Now, and you may notice there's some skin picking. There's probably bed sores too, but you can see some skin picking here. She died, of course. Now, I know that's sort of a sensational picture, but there still are people out there who are morbidly obese. I'm working with 2 high school girls who are over 400 pounds living at home. It's scary. It's not as much as it used to be because of diagnosis at birth. The parents jump on the bandwagon, they give them the right food, you know, get them moving around, they do all kinds of wonderful things. And in other countries where there isn't a lot of information like there is here, Mexico, Puerto Rico, I went there and people were in wheelchairs and because they don't have any services. You are preventing this by having them in your homes. You are saving lives. You may not realize it because you haven't seen them go from huge to, you sort of inherited them chubby. But you are saving lives. Without those services, without those homes, where would they be? they'd be at home with their parents so their parents could handle them anymore. Then they would be put God knows where. God knows where. So probably someplace that doesn't have a clue about Prader-Willi syndrome, and they'll die. Now, I want to point out that people with Prader-Willi syndrome, their metabolic rate is about half of the same age peer. That is significant in terms of medication, how they metabolize meds, and also how they metabolize food. When they're very large, they tend to be inactive. The largest amount of weight I recall hearing, although I think there's other stories, is someone who gained 24 pounds in 36 hours. They gain weight very quickly because of the metabolism, being allowed to eat and not moving. So that's why it's good to weigh them daily if they're obese. If they've been at their weight and they're at a good weight, you don't have to do that. But because if you see a big jump, which you might see after a home visit, I hope it's not too big, I hope it's just a couple pounds, because that's normal. I mean, I always got fatter when I went home. But if you see a big jump in a day, you start investigating because there's a food source. And you have to find out where it is. Is it the day program? Is it whatever? Is it your house not being food secure? So they have some learning strengths. That doesn't mean they're really strong strengths. It means they're relative. Good long-term memory. Ask them about something that happened a long time ago and they can tell you it in detail, especially if it involves food. Oh, Aunt Mary 10 years ago had a white cake and it had pink flowers around it and blah, blah, blah. I mean, minute detail. Their receptive language is good to a point. In other words, they understand what you're saying as long as you only say a couple words at a time. If you get into long strings of information, or you've lost them. So you really, when you do, but they have a good vocabulary for receptive language, you have to always check in and make sure they really did understand you. And give very short directions, follow up. The folks with the deletion especially, who was telling me about, no, that was yesterday, puzzles. Did any of your folks do that and they're really good at it?
Absolutely, he'll have 30 different puzzles to pick up the one that matches. It's amazing. They're better at puzzles than a typical matched group. It's an unusual skill. Visual processing, that's why we talk about charts and routines and the menus up and all of that. Because they don't hear that. I mean, they hear, but they get overwhelmed really fast because they have such slow processing. If you've worked with people with ADHD or certain learning disabilities, same thing. They have good basic math skills, up to addition, subtraction, maybe a little multiplication. Reading skills. They're pretty good at decoding and reading words. They love to, in school, they love to go to kindergarten and read to the kids. So if they read a story and you said, okay, what town does John live in? Melville. Okay. What color jacket did he have in the story? Red. Why do you think he told that lie? They'll look at you like, comprehension, which makes it hard in school because once they hit around 3rd grade, you're looking for more than just basic reading. Don't ask why questions. And if you do it, all you get is a repetition of some other statement maybe that just came before. They can't do why. They're generally social and friendly.
really friendly if they're out in the community and they see a food source. IQ is not protected. When parents call me and say, oh, Dr. Goff, I want to talk about my child, he's having a little trouble, but he's not like the others. He has a really high IQ. I'm thinking, poor devil, you're in for it. That just means they're going to be better at Prader or Willi. It's not protective. So there was a resident I worked with who was in a residential program, worst skin picker, rectal digger, ate feces. She had a regular high school diploma, she had 100 IQ, and she was the toughest I've ever worked with. Perseveration forever. She just wouldn't stop. And I talked with her about the rectal digging and eating feces, and I said, well, Sally, you know that your body has already taken out the nutrients, the good stuff. The rest needs to be thrown away. She said, I know, but her rationale was, but it's mine. It came from my body. You see that very concrete, limited thinking? And that made sense to her. How could that be bad? It's not like she ate other people's feces, she ate her own. She also said to me at one point, because she was in a program where the other residents were nowhere near as sophisticated as she was intellectually. And she told me, I wish I had been born more retarded, then it wouldn't hurt so much. She was right. She was depressed always. So look for those guys with a higher cognitive abilities and depression. Attend to that. Their weaknesses are short-term memory, particularly for auditory, again, and I mean short-term. Go upstairs. I want you to separate your laundry into like a dog. This is true for my daughter who has ADHD, poor short-term memory. So the person goes upstairs, you go up 20 minutes later,
They're standing there.
and they're standing there, and if you don't understand this, you're like, what did I tell you? Other people have to use that washing machine. And you may start an incident. They really don't remember. So, go upstairs, and you need to almost do everything with them if you want it done right, to teach them. Expressive language, even though some of them talk a lot, have a great vocabulary, what they can't do is express feelings very well. And I wish they could. They can't explain what's going on. Have you ever asked somebody, well, what's going on with you? You seem upset. They really don't know what to say. They might say, I'm mad, or I'm sad, because they've learned those words. But they can't really dig down and share their inner life. One mom told me that her son was going through some distress, and she said to him, honey, I just wish I could get inside your head so I would know what's going on. And he said, oh no, Mom, you don't want to do that. It's a mess up there. Their brains never stop, and it is a mess, and it's really hard. Sequential processing, again, why we use visual things, to see the big picture of how one thing might lead to another. They can't do that. Like in an IQ test, you're supposed to put puzzles together in order of how things happen. They can do that. So that's why we have activity charts. Don't use time. Don't put time on it. Because if it doesn't happen right at 12:30, you're screwed. Just put the activity. Day program, home, physical activity, snack. Just put them in order, sequential order.
but don't put the time. That will make them so anxious if anything goes awry. Difficulty with abstract concepts. They don't get sarcastic humor, so watch that. They like concrete humor. I mean, do something silly and they'll get it, you know. It's like Lucille Ball humor. And most of them do have a good sense of humor, but it's not a sophisticated one. And they definitely don't understand idioms. You know what an idiom is? So if you say, oh, look out the window. It's raining cats and dogs.
Wait for cats and dogs.
I don't see any cats and dogs. Very concrete. They don't. You could teach them some idioms to make them be able to interact better. At the Hempstead house, there were only two guys, Lester and Dennis, who are both deceased, but they were introducing themselves to each other, and I'm doing this because they had come out of institutions. If you know those people, they give us a lot. Would you have for lunch? I had blah, blah, blah. Would you have for lunch? I had blah, 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 and a cake. I'm over here in this, so I go, Dennis, you're full of baloney. No, I'm not, I didn't take it. Couldn't get that you're full of baloney expression and felt like I was accusing him of getting baloney. So they're very concrete. So if you're going to make jokes, make sure they can understand them. Now, to the good part. The hypothalamus. This is the heart of the problem. It interacts significantly with the endocrine system. Its job is to maintain the body's internal homeostasis. They have hypothalamic dysfunction. And one of the things it affects is weight, food intake, which is the hallmark of PWS. Their sense of satiety, feeling full, never happens. There's no treatment for that. We are doing research on medication for appetite and behavior. There's nothing I can tell you has made it through all the trials, and we can start using it. So, the hypothalamus effects. And I want you to look at these things. See if they remind you of Prader Willi. Mood instability, their learning and memory, their body temperature. Oh, we just talked about that. Their sex drive, fear, aggression, their metabolism, their sleep cycle, their growth, their blood pressure. Oh, what's that? And heart rate. Hunger and thirst, sense of fullness. Isn't that Prader Willi syndrome? That's why this is hardwired. This is hardwired. So you can't behave your mom out of food stealing or what else? Well, some of their emotions and mood instability, you can't reward programs for if you're good, you get. And I've said this to a lot of people. If the stakes for that reward system are too high, let's say if you're good all week, on Friday, you can go out to a restaurant. Now, some of them may be able to make it. Others are not, and in part because that reward is too high stakes. And all they're thinking about is getting to that restaurant, and it's making them anxious, and anxiety equals often anger and even aggression. So a lot of people blow it way before that, probably most. Do provide rewards for things they can do, things they can control. But here's the things that are almost impossible. So what we see are people with hyperphagia, skin picking, anxiety, obsessive compulsive disorder, rigid thinking, tantrum, impulsivity. 26, and that doesn't say that there. Yeah, it does. 26% of people with Prader-Willi syndrome are also diagnosed with autism. You may have folks that, and the others have a lot of similarity to people with autism, like the OCD and anxiety, trouble with change, rigid thinking, but they don't have it. They're much more social and interactive and all of that. Oh no. I'm sorry, that's one figure. Another figure is 8%, which I think is probably more likely. There was a big move to get people diagnosed with autism in schools so they'd get services. And so they would push to have them meet criteria, but most do not. I think it's OCD, that's the 26%. We'll see. So, you can stop now. Okay. There's hyperphagia, but there's a lot of other food-related behaviors too, as you know. There's the self-injurious behavior, the anxiety, OCD. Now, OCD is an anxiety disorder. That's what it is. Perseveration, repeating the same question over and over. Do any of you guys have compulsive behaviors? Having to do something, sort of ritualistic? Transitions as well as changes are tough. So even in a day program, transitioning from this job to this job can be really difficult for them, particularly if they're not finished in their minds with this job. They have a need to finish. Big problem in schools. They have a need to finish. Change, and we're going to talk about that more specifically. Perceived unfairness. Notice I said perceived. So that might be like a turn taking thing. On Monday, Sally gets the front seat of the car of the van. Tuesday, it's Mary, blah, blah, blah. Sally is sick on Monday. So the staff says, well, Mary, you can go ahead and take the front seat today, and Sally can have it tomorrow. Mary doesn't say anything. She gets the front seat. Tuesday rolls around. Sally is allowed to have the front seat. Mary goes berserk. It's my turn. See, Tuesday, that's my turn. And then we say, but you had your turn early. You had it, and we try and rationalize. Well, you can spend your life doing that. So, once it's said, it's said. So the solution to that, of course, is nobody gets the front seat on Monday. We're going to talk more about all those things. Here's some of the behaviors you'll see. Both that do you have people who won't move on to the next task or activity, whether it's at home? People who, like in a day program, suddenly or even in the house, getting up and walking out somewhere. The perseveration, refusing to participate in an activity, the sleepiness, especially in the afternoon. A verbal or physical response to change in a routine. And I'm going to give you an example. Refusal to take direction from anybody who isn't the one. So, you're not the manager. I have to talk to George, even though the DSP is empowered to make that decision. Or at the day program, you're not the boss of me, it's so-and-so. You know what? Go get so-and-so. Just keep it simple. You see these dramatic responses to what seems like a small thing. It's not to them, in part because they might have misinterpreted it. Removing clothing? Yeah. I gotta tell you a clothing removal story. So Dennis, God, he must have been this tall. He was in the hospital. He had a pacemaker, so he was in the ICU. Where there were a lot of elderly people because they often have heart. You know, he's in the cardiac ICU. So lunchtime comes. He eats his lunch, and for some reason unknown to me, he strips. Now, Dennis was about this. He had a very rotund torso. Like them all, he had a micro penis. You wouldn't see it in part. I remember one of the nurses saying, "I don't think he has a penis." I've been there before. It was that small. And if you're overweight, it sort of covers that area. And he's got really fair skin, and his voice didn't change. You know, so he looks sort of, I'm not gonna, female, but androgynous, really. So he finishes his lunch and takes off his clothes, and then he starts going down the hall, going into your room, and you're like, maybe you're sleeping. Eats your lunch. He continues down the hall, eats your lunch, and so on until somebody catches him. When I heard the story, all I could think of is one of these poor old ladies waking up and seeing him and thinking, oh my God, have I gone to heaven? Because he looked like a little cherub. Fortunately, that would have killed him, I'm sure. Why did he take off his clothes? Maybe he didn't like, you know, the Johnny, I don't know. He didn't do it at home. There's a lot of things they might do that they don't always do, okay? So let me talk about the outburst change. So day program has a field trip plan, as some would do, and you're going to the zoo. People are going to bring their bag, lunch, and extra money to get a frozen yogurt. The supervisor talks to a group and says, guys, we're going to have to reschedule. It's raining outside, and all the animals will be in their little houses. And we don't want to walk around in the rain. But you said, I have my money for my, for my yogurt. George gave it to me, I had it. He said I'm going. And here's the slip that says I can go. And you're like, I know, honey. And he could have 100 IQ. I know, honey. But look, it's raining outside. You think he'd understand that, right? No. So you keep engaging. But you said, and one time, this one guy, because of a change in schedule, actually, you know, some programs have phones on the wall. He ripped off that part and just threw it at the teacher. That's how bad it can be. They're not all that dramatic, but change is huge. Now, a lot of people don't like change. People with autism, that's one of their characteristics. The difference is food. When you make a change in the life of someone with Prader-Willi syndrome, their first thought is, what about my food? How does this affect my food? So if you are having a change at home or a day program, and something like this happens, first of all, you should always have plan A and plan B. Because shit happens. Somebody calls in sick, the van's broken down, somebody else is having an outburst, so you can't go. So in this situation, hey guys, we're gonna have to reschedule. It's pouring rain outside. The animals will be in their little houses. We'll go again real soon. I know you really want to do this. And before, and it was already on the calendar, so it makes it better. So the person goes to the calendar and says, remember we talked about if we couldn't go to the zoo, we'd rent that movie, we bought the zoo, you know that movie, I love that movie. And I'll go out and get some yogurt.
bring it back here, and you can scoop it out. We'll have lunch at the same time. Go right to it, and then you'll see it. If you can get it fast enough, you'll see a de-escalation. Take care of the food issue. That's all they think about. Whether you realize it or not, they don't always show their hand. It's all they think about. Let's focus on hyperphagia for a while. That's not right. What's important to understand is it's satiety, not feeling full. It's not a physiological hunger like we have. It's not feeling full. So, and there's no effective medications yet. There's some in trials that are looking promising, and there is no effective behavior intervention program because it's not a behavior problem. Remember the hypothalamus, okay? Never feeling full is not the same as being hungry. You know those days where you're like, I want something. What do I want? And you go to the refrigerator, and you open it, and you take out some cheese. No, that's not it. Open the refrigerator, you try a piece of fruit maybe. That's not it. You're not satiated, but it's not because you're hungry. And until you get to the ice cream, which is always the solution. So, if anyone encourages you, if anyone ever says, we're going to give him more to satisfy his hunger, he's going to be eating for a week. Because you can't. And in fact, there was a sandwich study, we couldn't do this nowadays, where they had a matched group of folks with Prader-Willi syndrome and typical kids, and they put out sandwich quarters. And the typical kids, they said, eat until you're full. So the typical kids, I think maybe they ate around 7 or so. Prader-Willi guys had to be stopped at about 70. And the other thing about Prader-Willi guys, even if they eat a bunch of food, you know how at Thanksgiving you're like, oh my God, I'm stuffed, I ate too much. Let's say they had a lot to eat. And you're not hungry. You're like, well, want some pot? No, not now. I can't have that now. Maybe in a couple hours. Not about 1 hour later, a person with Prader-Willi syndrome would want more food. It's really a terrible thing. So don't try filling them up, because all it does is create some bad eating habits. I know that was done here at least about 10 years ago. People were allowed, because I was visiting, people were allowed to come home and have salad because no calories. And I said, well, so they would come in from day program and say, I want salad, which now we know probably wasn't so good for them, but so they'd sit and eat salad, and if they wanted more, they could have more. And I said, how long do they sit there eating salad? Well, sometimes till dinner. Great. So they're eating salad, not interacting, not doing the, not living. We want to normalize food in our environments. You're gonna have a great breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It's gonna happen at this time every day. That's it. That's it. The preoccupation with food, they could if they get going on a food story, it can go on forever. The other thing that, and the group home people know this, if the door's open in the kitchen, or if it's an open kitchen, and the staff are putting away groceries and all that, a week later, if somebody says, do we have any canned tomato sauce? Yeah, it's right over there in that cupboard in the way back.
right? They take that in and know everything about the kitchen. They know more about that kitchen probably than you do. So that's that preoccupation too. One person I know named his plant peanut butter. You know, everything was food related. Some of them will go into the garbage. Some will eat pet food. Some will pick up gum and popcorn at the movie theater or on a bus. Some won't. One guy at Thanksgiving time when he went home and Mom left out her turkey on the counter to thaw, he ate the entire turkey.
Raw.
Raw. That's not uncommon. And one of the reasons, actually, there's another reason people wear layers sometimes. And so if somebody in the group home walks in the door and goes right to the bathroom, they're probably eating something. And one gal who lived at home, she was so obese, her arm was very wide, so she would steal frozen dinners. So she could put them under her arm and not get caught, right? Illegal activities. There's a resident, she was in a group home, pretty sharp gal. She had never had this issue before. She had never run away, eloped, or anything. The windows weren't locked. The doors were alarmed, but the windows weren't alarmed. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say locked. So one night, she goes out through her window, finds her way to some not great neighborhood, meets a guy, and start negotiating for sex. They know what sex is. So the guy says, well, do you want to pay $5, $10, $15? She's like, 10 is good. They have sex, so she has money to do whatever. And comes back, and the staff are, of course, out of their minds, because, you know, anything can happen. And why did you do that? How could you not want? Maybe they did something. What was going on that you would do that? I was hungry. She knew she couldn't get food in the kitchen because it was locked. I was hungry. First time she had ever done anything like that. It's unpredictable. And I'll tell you the rest of this story. And her mom, who's a hoot, a self-proclaimed New York Jew, so don't get on my case for it. She talks about herself that way. So when she heard what her daughter had done, she goes, oy vey, she could have gotten so much more. This is not unusual if they can get out. They're very vulnerable. It's happened to them. And I mean, I think it was Lester when he was at Bernard Farnston. He was allowed to go out. He would panhandle to get money, to get food. Sometimes he had to give a little. He was abused, of course. Well, come with me and I'll do this, I'll give you this, I'll give you that. Okay. So even negative consequences like that can't override the drive for food. It's not pica. I know some of the, sometimes that's a diagnosis. You know, pica's eating inedibles. Now you have people who ingest inedibles. If they had pica, they'd be ingesting lots of different things. They're doing it so they get to the hospital. They want to go to the hospital because at the hospital, they usually get food because the nurses, especially if they start screaming, the nurses will do anything to shut them up. And very very often, mom comes and takes them home. Which is another benefit, right? We know that to be true. The only other reason they would eat an edible is if they mistake it for food somehow. Now remember, for them, yes.
Question, if the doctor that they're seeing diagnoses them with pica, would it be that we can tell the doctor it's not pica, but they're treating it like pica when there is a behavior?
Yeah, you can tell them, but if that person, like, people with pica have favorites too. Like there was one gal at a program, she loved zipper pulls. So they had to put away jackets and the mats, anything with zipper pulls. But she had pica. You're talking about someone who has a behavior and uses that.
Exactly, because.
And that's when you clear the area.
We clear the area, but when we talk to the doctor, we only focus on the behaviors.
Right.
So during those behaviors, they use those words, but we know it's really not, because when we're in a stable situation,
She doesn't do it.
That's not even a thought.
If she had pica, she'd be doing it every day.
Correct.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, yeah, you can tell the doctor whether he listens or not, I don't know. You know what you have to do.
Yeah.
The gal, one of the over 400-pound gals, I just got an incident report, and she has fidgets. I'm not a fan, by the way. She has these fidgets to reduce skin picking, and so what she's figured, she just started this. Put them in her mouth, then she'll take a drink of her drink, like she's trying to swallow it. She'll break them and put it in her mouth. This is a new behavior, never happened before, but she's figured out this is a way to get out of things at school she doesn't want to do, and maybe get home. Although we've counseled the parents not to do that. Yes?
Has there been any studies, it just hit me now, I don't know, I think,
Yes.
but lack of taste or scent with these individuals, maybe that's a piece of
Nope.
the component of the,
They-
because the food, if something wouldn't even taste good or was not appealing, do they have those senses intact?
They smell and taste,
Are we
but
sure?
they can eat, they will eat what we
No, I
can-
know that, that's what I'm trying to,
Yeah,
like,
they taste
identify.
it, they smell it. It's food. Mouthwash, toothpaste, in most of the houses you have to dole it out. Toothpaste is food, liquid medicine is food.
But is there like a difference in the way that is
Not that
being-
we have ascertained.
I'm wondering now.
There's no research that says that they smell or taste differently.
Maybe it's a different type, so like the things that are aversive to us, for instance,
Are not aversive to
to them because of some sort of lack of
Not to our knowledge.
taste bud thing or
No.
scent thing.
Not to our knowledge. And,
That's what I'm thinking.
but it can, I mean, my God. One of the reasons we don't have pets in group homes is that. The other reason, and I don't like to, is because if somebody gets angry, they might take it out of the pet. And pets have been seriously harmed, including one who was thrown out, a dog thrown out a window. We don't want to put any. The other reason is the individual who wanted the dog, just like your kids, never takes care of it. So the staff have to do the dog walking or clean the kitty litter and all that, and you got enough to do. Any more question about any of these? They will go into your trash can outside, by the way, and I know when we started Hempstead House, we built a box with a lock on it, to put the trash cans in. It's not there anymore. And if you do have a problem with people going out and getting into the trash, that's a solution. And never sit them near a trash can anywhere. They can learn nutrition like nobody's business. If you give them nutrition and talk about their menu plan, they'll get it like that. And you know what? If we're gonna restrict their access to food, we got to give them as much power as we can around food. So we talk about food choices, not so much as a way to everything, but it's health. Your health, it's health.
Do they get fixated or OCD on the nutrition part?
Oh, they're like, when I opened Hempstead, I had the families, the staff, the individuals, clinicians, we all sat around a table, introduced ourselves, had a conversation. Later on, when I talked to the individuals who were living there, I said something about it. So do you remember who was there? Rosemary. She was a dietitian. Yep. She was amazing. And she would come and do direct lessons with them, which made it easier when it came to do trade-offs. Now here's some choices within. Sometimes you run out of something, God forbid, if it's on the menu. So you have an exchange list. You know, a cup of cornflakes equals 3/4 of a cup of raisin bran. One slice of this equals this. So when you have to make a substitution because you forgot something, they're okay with it. They're okay with it because it's fair and it's equivalent. And so if you do want to give some choices about things, just make them controlled choices. Okay? Any questions about that? They're really, they could have taught, they did teach new staff nutrition. Well, no, I don't get that, I get this. Of course, then they'd also try to trick them and go, try to trick the day program staff and go to day program, and they ate their lunch on the bus and say they forgot to do the lunch.
They still do.
They still do. Yeah. So we have to have a better relationship with day programs. If there's a special occasion, plan it. Day program's going out for pizza on Wednesday, and apparently they do that. And I know one of the gals will call home in the moment and say, we're at the pizza place and can I trade my potatoes tonight for a slice of pizza? The answer should be, no honey. But if we can get their schedule and we know when they're going to do that, we'll sit down and plan. Because when they do that in the moment, you've opened a door that will never close. They can do it anytime. And you want to teach them, not just indulge, you want to teach them about their menu. The other thing is assessing their ability to be around food. I know you have a kitchen fade out thing. If they don't steal food for X amount of time, they can go in the kitchen and I don't know what they do. But my experience with that, when I've seen it, is they go into the kitchen and they're like, it's like they just went to heaven. I remember Lisa Jacobson, I was walking, taking her to a day program, we were walking down the hall and there was a soda machine and all of a sudden she just and stood in front of it until I prompted her to move. So, that's an overwhelming environment for them. And we have to take baby steps. Some of them can handle more food access than others. So what I've been suggesting is bringing the food out of the kitchen, bring out the breakfast ingredients, pre-measured, the cereal, the milk, the fruit, let them assemble it. That's making breakfast, right? That way you don't want them to necessarily weigh or measure themselves unless you really know, because they're gonna try and get a little more. If they're stuffing, taking a handful of cereal, they're not ready. If they're not, and they're proud of themselves, which they should be, and they have their breakfast, great. You may move on to lunch. But everything's pre-measured, preset. Here's your 2 slices of bread, your ham, your mustard, and let them assemble their lunch. If there's no sticking the ham slices in their mouth, which is what a lot of people would do, that's great. But don't put them in the kitchen where they're paralyzed with fantasies. Also, that's part of assessment. You guys haven't assessed their ability to be around food. You're making assumptions. So that's one way to, the other thing is if they're standing there and their eyes are going and they're really hesitant, they may not want to be around, they may not want to do that. There are lots of people with Prader-Willi syndrome who do not want access to food. They know what they're going to do, and they don't want to do it. There are apartment programs where people are living in apartments with supervision, but food is brought in on a daily basis, and so they're more for the whole day, so they get to manage a whole day's worth of food. Some individuals, I remember this one guy who, very smart, he said, I don't want to do that, I don't want that program, because I know what I'll do, I'll eat it all at once. They know more about themselves than we do. So assess their ability to be around food. Now just take a peek at food is everywhere. Anybody know a place where there isn't food? Let's say somebody with Prader-Willi syndrome were here. Where would they be sitting?
Over on the empty chair.
Wrong. They're too smart for that. They would be sitting in the back corner because we would all be leaving first. So I'm serious. You have to witness this stuff. And then they would in their pocket.
Which I think is true.
Right? They know. It's just hard, isn't it? Staff, day program, residential, if you leave your purse out, if you leave your jacket out, and they go into it and steal your money or your Tic Tacs or Chiclets or whatever you have, that's on you. That's on you. You can call it stealing, yes it is, but you set them up. So make sure your stuff is put away. And they know it's in your car, by the way. They do, I don't know how they do. But I was always very careful to lock my car and hide things. When I go to a Prader-Willi house, like Sunday, I was like, oh my God. Because I was afraid if somebody was walking out and they looked in, you know, you don't want that. And they have supersonic hearing, by the way. Right? This one couple was saying, you know, my husband and I hid a package of cookies. And then when he went to bed, we knew he was deep asleep. We got out the cookies. He started to open them. What are you eating? It's like a gift. They also, by the way, can hear you talking always, and you know we shouldn't talk in front of them, about another resident, about their family. They will take it and tell on you. And the other thing is, if you're talking, and let's say they're over there, and they started hearing, you may not even be talking about that person, but you're having they assume it's about them. What did you tell her? What did you say about me? Were you talking about me? And it's really hard to disabuse them of that, right? So have your little chit-chats out of earshot. And I know parents violate this rule all the time, I know. questions about any of these sources of food? Oh, I have to tell you a funny story about this. So there was a guy, I just got this story, he was a student, and he would break into his sister's piggy bank and take out her change. And every morning when he got in the bus, he'd shake everybody's hand. He had a quarter in his hand. So he would shake their hand in exchange for the food they were going to give him. Isn't that smart? I think that's really smart. And there's another story. There's this guy, he was living at home. He started gaining weight. And his mom wasn't sure what was going on. Turns out, he was stealing food from wherever, tying it to a string and dropping it down some air duct, and then having it when he had the privacy to have it. And so Mom goes, so that explains why the dog was nosing around the air ducts. You know, that's pretty clever. You know, like alcoholics, they find these places to hide things, or drugs. So you really can't let, definitely, if I know this is tough at day program, we'll talk about it. And they can't go places unaccompanied, generally. There have been people who've gone from point A to point B, maybe to a job, if it's a straight line, no stopping, and that works. Again, you have to assess each individual. You don't just have a program for bus stuff. This is a problem in day program. There's lots of food in the programs, and then other people bring in food and share it. If they're unsupervised, where was it? Where am I? Hopog. In Hopog, in the staff cafeteria, they've gone in there and broken the locks and gotten in because there's not enough supervision in the day program. I'm not blaming day programs. It's a whole different world. But if they're unsupervised, they're getting food. And if there is food, they know where there's food. They can't go on errands alone. They can't go to the bathroom alone. Bathrooms, by the way, that's where they exchange food and money. For all I know, and this isn't just Prader, Willi. It's, you know, it's where they date and all that stuff. It's where they have sex. So keep it, when they have to go to the bathroom, keep track of the frequency with which they go to the bathroom. If it changes, there's food. No, you're just stretching, okay. If you have local shopkeepers and you have someone who is allowed to purchase stuff, just make sure they know. If she shows up without an adult, call. She can't, don't sell her anything. Everybody has to know about it. This is, well, at the house they do. But at day program, it's very important that all the staff know that so-and-so is Prader Willi, and if you see her in these situations, there should be a go-to person at the day programs. One person that the individual goes to for solutions, problems, answers. And so let's say you're at the day program and you see somebody over at the vending machine and they have Prader Willi, and you're like, that doesn't look right. Go to the go-to person so they can handle it with the house. So everybody needs to know, because especially at day program, more eyes, more likely. You don't intervene, you don't take food away, oh my God, never. But you can help handle it with the house. Sometimes we have to do searches when they come back from home. Some parents give them money, and we don't know about it. Some parents send them home with food. It may even be to share with the other residents. Not good. Oh, this is a good one. There was this woman once, she was home with her girl, she took one of her friends with her. She was home for a weekend, had dinner, and apparently they had duck. So So when she came back to the residence, they did a search because they know her. And they didn't see anything. And then she was bending over at one point, and these two little duck feet, yes, are sticking out. And they're like, what is that? I don't know. I don't know how that got there. And they will lie, they will deny in the face of all evidence. Lester, when he was at the Children's Institute, nobody can figure, and that was for Prader Willi, it was a hospital type setting. Somehow he got his hands on a square of lasagna, put it in his pocket, so he could have it later. They're amazing, it's amazing. And sometimes, particularly when they get down, their weight gets down, and it's holiday time and you're having a celebration at a program or something, and a staff person goes, and everybody else is getting 2 cookies, and your Prader Willi person is only getting 1, and there's always a staff person who says, oh, look at him. Why can't he have another cookie? Come on. And that happens more than you know. Remember metabolic rate. So that 2 cookies is 4, let's say. So don't feel sorry for them. Even if they lose all the weight, they still have Prader-Willi syndrome. And that's happened here. You have people here who are down to their ideal body weight range, who are no longer.
I have a question to go back to what you said about parents bringing food. Now I know they're not supposed to. How do we go around if they do? Because now
you take it from them.
One sees,
just like the rest.
No, just like if the residents see that they hear it's for them. At that point.
You know what I do? You know who does that.
Well, that's what
yeah. So what I would do in that situation, as soon as I heard the car pull up, I'd be out there.
Oh, okay.
Did you bring anything for the other residents? Yeah, I brought, okay, thank you, I'll take it. Try and cover it up, or put it up your shirt like they do. And then maybe you can dole it out appropriately later, if you can make it work. Same with money. If you know a particular resident generally comes in with money, you need to search, or ask them, and then search. Okay. Here are some specific figures about how a menu might be planned. 45% less carbs, 30% fat, 25 to 30% protein. Oh, 20 grams of fiber per day is best for weight control and to improve body composition. It isn't always just about weight. And reducing the calories is great, but it doesn't control body fat as well as a carb-controlled diet. Yeah.
Are you coming to the Hampton House today to talk about that?
Say what?
Are you coming to the Hampton House to talk about this?
I already did on Sunday.
Oh, you did on Sunday with Crystal?
And the manager was at my training yesterday.
Oh, Crystal was shot.
So all that previous stuff that we used to do with the green goes and all, because you talked about memory, and I can already hear I can hear the girls, all the green goes, all the green goes.
Of course they want green goes, those are the free.
Right, so that is now dead in the water.
I never liked it. That came from the Children's Institute, which was, and it was a way actually to help parents keep it simple. You know, red foods, limited, yellow
Even that
foods.
most current Prader Willi, the book that we've been using, which is an ADA.
I prefer American Dietetic Association because you can manipulate it more specifically, and you can teach them. They can learn it, the exchange, and right. I like it better. I never liked red, yellow, green, go.
Okay.
It's good for at home, but not for a group home.
Okay.
In my opinion. If they were at the Children's Institute, and some of them had been, that's where they learned it.
So it is safe for us now to not embrace that green go.
Yeah, it's not specific enough.
Okay.
person, this is a cocaine addict, this is a Prader Willi person. So they showed the normal person some, you know, sweets, cupcakes, blah, blah, blah. That's how his brain reacted. They showed the cocaine person cocaine. That's how his brain reacted. They showed the Prader Willi person pictures of sweets. That's how their brain reacted. What two are most alike?
Yeah.
Cocaine.
Yeah.
Sugar is an addiction. And that includes sugar substitutes. That also increases the drive for sweets. When we started in the old days, Crystal Light was the, oh my God, it may still be. Because all we knew then was, well, they were very obese, so you just wanted them to lose weight. And salad or vegetables. And now we know vegetables need to be cooked till they're soft so they can digest better. We didn't know any of this when we started out. So I know a lot of you are trying to get rid of the Crystal Lights and all that sugar-free with substitute stuff and create ways. They don't like to drink plain water, by and large. So you gotta jazz it up a little. I know one manager's just putting a little bit of juice. And you could try putting the fruit in. It's already on their diet. They can have fruit and food at the end. We'll see how long it lasts. Sometimes they get tired of it. We are trying to reduce sugar, unnatural sugars, and sugar substitutes. They need exercise, but less for weight loss. Because I noticed in some of the programs, if people do X amount of exercise, they get extra calories. As if that exercise equaled those calories. They don't. When you look it up, oh, if I walk a mile, I burned off this many calories. Maybe you have, but they haven't because their metabolic rate and a lot of other issues and how vigorous, they're not real vigorous in their exercise. It's not 100 calories. So, and I'm not a big fan of someone gains weight or if you can exercise it off. That's like making exercise a punishment. And it shouldn't be. They need to exercise because they have osteoporosis. They need to do weight-bearing exercise. So add that to the repertoire. They need to increase muscle mass, decrease fat. I started an exercise program in Queens with Dr. Angulo, if any of you remember him. They had their menu, but we had a very exciting exercise program, and he measured changes in muscle mass and lean fat, and there was a real change, which is great, through exercise, not weight. The menu was for the weight. This was for other things. And you want to make muscles strong because the muscles support the bones.
I'm sorry if you said it, but what's GH for?
Oh, growth hormone.
Okay.
You definitely need to have record weights. Daily, if you have somebody who's obese and on a weight loss diet, or if they are in a new environment. If you have somebody who's all set, they're at the right weight, you could change that. You don't punish for it. They're not the ones who are making themselves lose weight. You are, right? We don't tell them that. We say, oh, you lost weight. So you don't punish. Oh, you put on you weigh blah, blah, blah. You went up 1 pound, neutral. Or you went down a couple pounds, that's great. But don't overdo that. There have been people who have become exercise junkies. I mean, I know some typical people who've done that because they're trying to But if they feel like weight is their life, some of them also start drinking a lot of water, then they have water intoxication, or they exercise too much. You have to normalize things for them. So don't pit exercise against weight. What you do need to do is make it routine, give a variety, and it can include going outside to this or that. Don't make exercise a bad word. Maybe you could change it to not time to exercise, but let's use the treadmill now, or let's go for a walk now, or because when I hear exercise and diet, I'm like, oh, I know I need to exercise and diet. You don't need to tell me that. Those are like bad words. So I don't talk about diets, I talk about menu plans. In my program that I'm telling you about in Queens, we had music, there's a lot of variables to it. The variable it came down to sustain their participation, which is about 100% staff doing it with them. The staff would act silly. The staff would, oh my God, I can't believe how fast you're going. I can't do that. They love it. They love it when staff act silly and are less capable than they are. That's the variable that will increase participation. I'm trying to see where we are. Is this how long have you been at this? Do you guys need to break it down, or do you want to go for a few more slides till it says part 2?
Keep going.
All right. I don't know. I can't stress the feature of anxiety enough, that they are constantly anxious. Here's some things people with Prader Willi have said about anxiety. I'm getting nervous throughout the whole day. Anxiety, it's just overwhelming. I know for me, it's definitely the stress and a lot of anxiety. Anxious or worried is a lot for me, like every single second of the day. It actually happens until something gets resolved. That's why we have to intervene with perseveration and that kind of stuff. Controlling my emotions, yeah. That's kind of hard sometimes because I get mad easily. Like, when I get stressed, I get angry at staff. It's like when I get too out of control, I can do bad things. And then another bad feeling comes in, like I should be out of my mind. They recognize their anxiety and stress. There's a correlation between anxiety and aggression. So instead of waiting till that, we need to intervene here. So we need to know what makes them anxious. And a lot of it is Prader Willi general stuff that I hope you're learning about. And then there's person specific. Food issues are the most obvious source, but they're of stress. So you need a food secure environment, you need to normalize it, you need routines, you need menus, but sometimes it's not food, it's about a sense of fairness. That's not fair, I'm gonna call my mother. And they do. But it's often food. Individuals with Prader Willi show higher rates of obsessions and compulsive behaviors. And an official anxiety disorder is an umbrella for lots of things, and this is part of it. So when you compare them to other groups of people with developmental disabilities, they win. 8% of people with Prader Willi are diagnosed with clinical OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, compared to 2.3 in the general population. That's a lot. That's a lot. Most, if they don't have clinical OCD, they have obsessive compulsive behaviors. They all have some. Well, not all, 37 to 58% according to one study, but I think it's more. Obsessions are, they get stuck with a thought in their head and it just won't go away. And that's, sometimes they perseverate, sometimes they act out around it, because they can't make it go away. I also want you to know, they can hang on to something, a worry or a concern or a slight for a long time. That's why if a staff person does one thing that they didn't approve of, you will never get back on their good list, ever. They hang on to that. That's the person who, years later, so this is the perseveration that we see typically. Well, we'll start. So they need reassurance. And if they don't, they're going to perseverate, they're going to get anxious. So if someone comes in today, programmer at the house, and says, my mom's picking me up on Friday. So great, that's nice. My mom's picking me up on Friday. We're gonna go to the blah, blah, blah. And you say,
oh, good, that your mom is picking you up on Friday?
yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's it more.
On Friday when my mom picks me up, that means I can't go to the Zumba class. You need to call the Zumba teacher and let her know I won't be there because she expects me to be there.
Okay, we can call the Zumba teacher together.
What's happening here is this will continue because the auditory reassurance isn't enough. Because I'm going to ask you now. You know, my mom's picking me up on Friday.
I heard. That's awesome.
Yeah. She is. And I will continue. And how many staff are in the house? I heard. Oh, really? I thought she was coming next week. Oh my God. Right? You've created such a mess. You need to know. If someone can't, I know most of you say, you'll answer, like with perception, you'll answer a question 3 times, blah, blah, blah. And then you'll stop. But we have to do more. We have to make it more concrete. And this is the hanging on to it a long time. If one, you know, they love to get each other. So sometime during the week, when I'm saying, I hope I go home this week, I hope I go home this week, you're saying, nobody sees you do that. It's in my head now. I'm not doing anything with it because it's complicated, because I think I am. And this is a true story. Then you're sitting at the dinner table and I'm sitting across from you and all of a sudden I explode. You're looking at me! What the hell? You gotta work it back. There's always a reason, unless they're psychotic. Most of them aren't, all the time. Work it back, you will find why that happened, unless they're in a psychotic episode. There's always a reason. And that's sort of the fun of working with Prader-Willi syndrome. It's like being a detective most of the time. As I said, it's constant, and the changes, even minute changes, can flip them out. Now, in the last group, they didn't say that their folks had many compulsions. You know, like, well, they never hand wash. That's not one of their things. But what are some other regular people compulsions? Checking the door lock. Checking the door lock. You know, you're in the car going to the airport, and you're like,
did I unplug the copy maker, and if you're a real OCD person, you have to go back and or the whole vacation, that's all you'll think about. These folks, their compulsions tend to be hoarding, ordering and arranging, needing to tell or say things, that's the perseveration, being concerned with symmetry or exactness. Some people, when they're using scissors and they're cutting something out, they just keep cutting until there's nothing left. Redoing things. One of the problems in schools, somebody's given a worksheet and they're going along, and say the aide goes, oh, I want you to look at that problem again. Well, first of all, they're gonna get mad at you for that because they don't do anything wrong. But if they are receptive, they'll erase it and everything else on the page. And they'll start all over. And sometimes they erase so much there's no paper there. But they want it to be perfect. That's the goal. You saw that, obviously. They need to finish. They need to finish. I think I said that before. If you're trying to move them from one task to another and they don't feel finished, it's really hard for them. And it's caused a lot of problems in school. Mary, you can put your work, I know you're not done, but you can put it away and finish it at home. Really not. It's okay. Just put it over in your box over there. Mary. There was one little girl who, she had to fill in the bubble kind of thing she had to do. She filled in every single bubble on every page. So I guess she got 100. So to the extent possible, let it go, unless there's a real reason to intervene. I mean, let the compulsions go, but don't let the anxiety go. If they're interfering, if something's interfering, you have to deal with it. And maybe most people are on anxiety meds. But if you can relieve the obsession, I think it's important if after those they ask you 3 times and you give them an auditory response and they're still, you have your special notebook where you write down, Lisa's going home this weekend, Mom's picking her up. So that, and maybe Lisa writes it herself. When you come on duty and she says, I'm going home this weekend, you go, oh, well, let me check the book. It's the first thing staff should do with Prader. And then, oh yeah, I see. Sally wrote it down. You go, oh, that's great. You do the same thing. Otherwise, she's just gonna you're all gonna say something that freaks her out. And in your case, if I were at day program when I talked about my mom's picking me up, what I would do is somehow write it someplace, visible, and then I would have the person watch me get in touch with the Zumba teacher by email or call. Because they don't want the Zumba teacher to be mad at them. This stuff you probably know. When the bin's full, you want something else, something's gotta go. This, it's not a big deal, just give them extra time. We already talked about this. I don't know how to fix the making things perfect. I haven't figured that out. You're certainly not gonna take your scissors away, you're gonna get stabbed. All right, break time?
Yes.